The year was AD 540. The ambitious Emperor Justinian had reigned the Roman Empire for 13 years now, and in that time, due to his brilliant general Flavius Belisarius, large parts of the former Western Roman Empire had been restored to Roman rule. The Roman Empire could have been restored in its entirety, but unfortunately, history did not go that way. Why this was and what happened instead shall be the topic of this video. If we take a snapshot of AD 540, we would say that the restoration of the Roman Empire was going perfectly according to plan. The Roman population had suffered little casualties from the war, apart from the disastrous sack of Mediolanum, where thousands of civilians had been massacred by the brutal Burgundians. But Rome had suffered little damage, and the old Roman institutions were still mostly intact. The Roman Empire had grown massively in size, and it really looked as if the Visigothic and the Frankish kingdoms would be next, and that the Roman Empire would be restored by 550 or 560. But this was not to be. In 541, a new king rose to the throne of the Goths, and he vowed to reclaim the lost Gothic lands from the Eastern Romans. To make matters worse, the eternal enemy in the east, the Persians, had awoken again, and they were launching invasions of Roman lands where Belisarius had to fight them in 541 and 542. To make matters even worse, a disease had started to spread from Egypt in 541, and it would prove to be very deadly. The people were already weakened by years of malnutrition after the anomalous climatic event of 536, about which we talked in the last video, and so a pathogen would have easy game to spread. It was the same bacterium that would be responsible for the Black Death 800 years later. It spread from Egypt through all parts of the Imperium Romanum, and because the Roman Empire had an intricate road system and many cities with very high population densities, the plague could spread easily. It is thought that from 541 until 549, possibly between 10 to 20% of the empire's population was killed. In Constantinople, during the peak of this pandemic, 5,000 people died per day. The streets were littered with dead bodies. This would of course drastically weaken the Roman Empire, while the much less densely populated and less urbanized barbarian kingdoms consequently would not suffer quite as dramatically. And please like this video and subscribe so that you won't miss any future videos on the fascinating era of the late Roman Empire. And please consider supporting our work on Patreon or via YouTube membership, because the long-term sustainability of this channel really depends on your support. YouTube is not really generous to such a niche topic about the late Roman Empire, and the ad revenue from the videos is really low. So in order to be long-term sustainable, I really need your financial support via Patreon or YouTube membership, as sorry as I am to say this. And we have a new Patreon supporter as the rank of Caesar, Shane Costello. Thanks a lot, Shane, for supporting this channel in such a generous way. And of course also thanks to every single one of you dear Patreons who support this channel. I'd like to think that Maiorianus would be proud that you support a channel bearing his name, and I am certainly very thankful to you. Gratias a tibi, amici. Thus Totila, the new king of the Goths, saw his time come, as he knew that the weakened Romans would not be able to mount an offensive, as they might have had the plague not broken out. In addition, Belisarius had to fight the Persians, so not as capable commanders were left in Italy, who on top were also quite disunited. Thus Totila managed to reconquer the north of Italy with relative ease, and by 543 he had advanced as far south as Naples, capturing the city but showing considerable humanity in his treatment of the defenders, a very noble and unusual behavior for that time. He even allowed the Roman garrison to withdraw. But Rome was still in Roman hands, and the Senate refused to surrender to Totila. Now finally in 544, Belisarius was sent back to Italy with 200 ships, and an unknown force of men. But as so often, we can assume it was far too small. He managed to recapture southern Italy, but meanwhile Totila had started to besiege Rome in late 545, and he did everything in his power to stall Belisarius' advance, who wanted to come to Rome's aid. Thus Belisarius did not relieve Rome in time, and the city was besieged for a whole year, from December 545 until December 546. Famine broke out, and now would the real disaster start for Rome. Had the ancient city still managed to retain some of its ancient splendor before the Gothic War had begun, now would the disaster of the war spell doom for Rome and for its population. The population was utterly starved, many thousands of people died, and when Totila finally entered the city in December 546, the picture must have been incredibly bleak. Enraged by the Senate's reluctance to surrender 2 years earlier, many senators were either captured or killed, and we can say that this was de facto the end of the old Senate of Rome. It would never recover from this blow. Totila planned to destroy the city, so enraged was he, but was persuaded by Belisarius in a letter not to do so. This letter is fascinating because it shows us how impressive Rome still must have been until these devastations had started, and what a gigantic impression the city must have left on Belisarius. The letter read as follows: "As to whom a city owes the construction of beautiful buildings are reputed wise and civilized, so those who cause their destruction are naturally regarded by posterity as persons devoid of intelligence, true to their own nature. Of all cities under the sun, Rome is admitted universally to be the greatest and most important. She attained this hill town not suddenly, nor by the genius of one man, but in the course of a long history, throughout which emperors and nobles, by their vast resources and employing skillful artists from all parts of the world, have gradually made her what you see her today. Her monuments belong to posterity, and an outrage committed upon them will rightly be regarded as a great injustice to all future generations, as well as to the memory of those who created them. Therefore, consider well. Should you be victorious in this war, Rome destroyed will be your own loss. Preserved, it will be your fairest possession. Should it be your fortune to be defeated, the conqueror will owe you gratitude if you spare Rome, whereas if you demolish it, there will be no reason for clemency, while the act itself will have brought you no profit. And remember that your reputation in the eyes of the world is at stake." This is a testimony to the power that Rome still exerted on people even as late as that time. Totila was thus convinced not to raze the city, but instead he tore down a third of the Aurelian walls. He then left the city in order to recapture the territory that Belisarius had reconquered, and Belisarius promptly used that situation and recaptured Rome for the empire in the spring of 547. He rebuilt the Aurelian walls as best he could, and Totila was unable to retake the city. But instead he retook many other cities surrounding Rome. As so very often, Belisarius lacked a large army, since Justinian either didn't want to send Belisarius reinforcements or simply lacked the capacity because of the plague and the ever-looming Persian threat in the east. Thus Belisarius could not successfully defeat Totila and was recalled from Italy in late 548 or early 549. It is quite possible that after Belisarius had feigned to accept the title of Western Roman Emperor in 540, which was just a ruse to capture Ravenna from the Goths, that after that event Justinian never fully trusted Belisarius again. We will never know the definitive answer, but Belisarius thus returned to Constantinople in 549, where he retired from military service. Only one more time, in 559, would he be recalled when in his last battle he defeated an advancing army of Bulgars and Huns, again as so often, with a much smaller force, saving Constantinople from a possible siege. Thus ended the career of this most brilliant tactician, who is rightly seen as one of the greatest generals in the history of humanity, and who so often had managed to achieve the impossible against overwhelming odds. In 549, Justinian used a Visigothic civil war to his advantage and sent a small army to southern Hispania, where a portion of the Visigothic kingdom thus could quite easily be captured for the Roman Empire. Meanwhile, the eunuch Narses was put in command by Justinian, and since Narses was a eunuch, he could not become a danger to the emperor. It is quite possible that therefore Justinian later favored Narses. Narses immediately was put in charge of a much larger army than Belisarius had ever received, lending credence to the theory of Justinian having deliberately disfavored Belisarius. 20 to 25,000 men were assembled at Salona, the capital of Dalmatia, where Marcellinus and Julius Nepos had had their home base some 70 to 90 years earlier. But Narses came too late for Rome's aid, as the city had been again besieged and captured by Totila in 549. Had the city already been massively reduced in population due to the siege of 546, this time we can really acknowledge that not many people were left in the city to begin with. Rome by that time now really had become a shadow of its former self. According to some estimates, possibly as little as 10 or 20,000 people had remained in the gigantic city that had still counted between 100 and 200,000 people when the Gothic War had started. But the utter desolation of Rome did not stop Totila from holding the last recorded chariot races in the Circus Maximus of Rome. This circus that could hold up to 250,000 spectators, now the whole population of the city could not even fill a quarter of the circus. What a sorry sight this must have been. We will talk more about the state of Rome immediately after the Gothic Wars in another video. Narses proved to be a quite capable commander. He was certainly not on the level of Belisarius' military genius, but also very capable, and compared to Belisarius, much better equipped with a much larger army. Already 2 years after arriving in Italy, Narses had managed to defeat Totila at the Battle of Taginae in 552. Totila was killed in the rout. The Goths holding Rome then capitulated, and Rome was swiftly captured by the Eastern Romans that same year. The final battle took place in 553 at Mons Lactarius, where the new king of the Goths, Theas, was defeated together with the last remnants of the Austro-Gothic armies. But it was not over yet, because a large force of 30,000 Franks and Alemanni had then crossed into Italy, thinking to use the chaos in Italy to their advantage and to plunder lots of cities. Many of the last remaining Gothic forces joined them, but Narses engaged the forces at the river of Volturnus in 554 and utterly destroyed the barbarian army. But it was only in 562 that the last Frankish, Alemannic and Gothic strongholds were subjugated. So it was thus in 562 that the Roman Empire would appear truly grand in its size. Many of the old territories of the former Western Roman Empire had been recaptured, and it would look as if the glory of Rome had been restored. But the reality was very different. In fact, we can say that this very war, paradoxically, that should have restored the glory of Rome, would be what would destroy the last remnants of ancient Roman glory in the West. We shall analyze the consequences of this disastrous war for the Roman Empire, for the city of Rome, and for the whole of the Mediterranean in the next video. And if you are interested in how Rome looked shortly before the start of the Gothic Wars, you can watch this video here in the upper right corner. But if you are more interested in the first part of the Gothic War, you can watch the other video in the lower right corner. I say thanks again to all friends of Roman history, gratias amici imperii Romani, and bene valete.